Welcome back to Basic Business Training Part 2. And again, we're happy that you can join us. We've been discussing in the last couple of sessions management, and we will continue on in that discussion today, specifically as it relates to human resources and how to have the right staff in your business. We also hope in this session to look at time management and to discuss how we can be better managers of our time. So last time, as we talked about, we were looking at where to find the right employee, and we talked about a few different things that you can be doing to find the right person. And I wanted to talk about this next point for a little bit, and that is, what should we do about hiring family members? I often get that question. Should we hire family members? Should we not hire family members? And for the most part, just from what I have seen, I believe it should mostly be avoided. But you may have a family business that has a legacy to it, and people have been raised in it, and they know it well, and then it can be a very good thing to do. But one of the things that we have to look at is what we talked about some time back, and that was, are they able to do the job? Are they willing to do the job? And are they manageable once they are on the job? And I have known a number of different business people who have hired a family member only to find out that that family member is just not committed to doing the job. They are looking for a paycheck. They are looking for some funds. They want to work in a place where they know the boss or the manager, and that can be convenient. But they are very difficult to manage. And once you have made that decision to bring a family member in, it's very difficult to let them go again, because you are potentially spoiling that relationship with them and with extended family as well. So just like if you hire an employee who does damage, that damage can happen very quickly for your business. A family member not only can damage your business, but it can also damage your relationship with the family as well. There was a woman that I know who hired her brother, and this brother was just this outgoing guy, just an amazingly charismatic person, and everybody loved him. But it was very difficult to get him to make a project go from point A to point B, but she was able to work with him and to find him after some years of working with him, to find him the position that will be best for him, where he's able to really work directly with customers and to flourish in that. But it's been a painful process of walking down that path of helping her brother to feel comfortable in the gifting God has given him, but still also serve the company. And so before you go down that path, you need to really take some time to pray about it. In fact, I was working with a pastor one time who had a provision shop, and he was telling me that not only would he not hire family members, but he has decided not to hire any members from his church anymore. And I thought that was interesting as a pastor that he would make that decision. But he said, the difficulty is that people see me as a pastor, and a pastor is somebody who has compassion. And the people that I hired from our church, they would call me and say, Pastor, my child is sick, I can't come to work. Pastor, I have this issue, or I have that issue, and I can't come to work. And Pastor, I need an advance on my salary because I have this issue. And it became very difficult for him to have clear lines of, this is the business and this is my role as a pastor in the church. And so he said, I will no longer hire people for my church. And so those things are difficult. And again, that's why I recommend that you post a position, that you write up what the position is, that you do interviews, so that there is that formal relationship, that people remember this is not the same relationship in this business, is not the same as when we are outside of this space. And so keeping those things very clear is going to be important. So be careful. Be careful that you don't go down a path that will be hard for you to reverse and undo. It's very difficult when we have compassionate hearts and somebody says, please give this person a job, that we just do that without doing the planning. But remember, the purpose of this business is to help the customer and the employees flourish. And if the person coming in is going to cause the customers to suffer and cause the business to flourish, that will be a problem, and we have to answer to the owner for that as well. So my advice is to proceed very cautiously. Avoid it if you can, unless you're very, very clear that that person from the family is willing to be managed by you, willing to be led by you, and willing to be accountable and responsible to you. Then we come to the question about compensation and how do we choose to pay people. This is a big challenge, and in many countries we have minimum wage laws, right? The government has listed what people should be paid for different jobs, but they often are not enforced. And so we are left with the challenge of figuring out how much to pay the person, how much to pay somebody for their salary. And as we see, the owner of the business tends to make a lot more than the lowest paid person, and that gap continues to get wider and wider. And it makes sense that there is a gap. It makes sense that you, as the owner, the person who started the business, you invested your capital, you took all the risk, you were working the long hours, that you would make more. But the question is, how do you decide how much to pay somebody? Do you pay them less than the minimum wage? Maybe you say, our business can't afford to pay you the minimum wage, and so this is all we can pay you for right now. Do you decide to pay them the minimum wage and comply with the law as it relates to that? Or do you decide to pay them above the minimum wage, what is called a living wage, because usually on a minimum wage, we can't live with that. We have to have maybe 2 jobs, or maybe both parents are working out of the home in order to cover all the needs. A living wage would be a wage that somebody could actually live on without having to get other jobs. And so how do you make those decisions for how much to pay? Just remember that the people who you hire and you are paying, they are watching for what you are taking yourself. They are watching to see whether or not you are actually being honest and saying, I can only afford to pay you this much, or whether you have set up a system where they are seeing you take a lot and they are getting very little. And so often, again, when I see business owners complain about employees that they can't trust, we do the finger pointing thing, right? If I'm pointing the finger at my employee, I have to look at how many fingers are pointing back at me, and what am I doing to actually make them feel like they are truly a part of this team, and that if this business flourishes, they too will flourish. And so sometimes we find that employees begin to steal either in terms of time or in terms of resources because they believe that you as the owner are stealing from them. You are not paying them what they should be paid, and therefore they in turn justify their behavior. It's not the right thing to do, but they justify it because they believe that you are stealing from them. So how do you figure this out? How do you make decisions for how much to pay? And so you need to find out what other businesses are paying their employees. You need to maybe include some benefits for the position. Maybe you can't pay them as much as you'd like, but you can help them with their transport or to get to work and to get home, or maybe you can feed them during their course of their job. And there are other benefits that you might be able to offer. You want to also make sure that you do equal pay for equal work. Don't favor some friends or some family members who are your employees against the others. You may ask them to keep it confidential how much they get paid, but it usually will come out in some way, and then you can have some resentment. And then you also want to think about increases in salaries. How can you give an increase, or what can you do to give an increase based on the effectiveness of the employee? Will you do an inflation increase every year if you can? Will you give a bonus of some sorts? How will you help the employee so that they can see that if the business is doing well and they're working hard, that it's not just you that's profiting, but it's that they too can profit financially to accomplish some of the goals that they have as well. And so all these things factor into compensation, and it's risky, but it's also good, and you need to really do some thinking and talking to people about what they pay, how they pay, and what type of benefits they offer, and so on. Then you've hired the person, you've decided on the compensation, now it's time to do some training. What type of training will you offer? How will you build the capacity of the employees once they are on the job? How will you keep pace with the world and with your competition? And remember that this should be fun. This should be part of your team meetings, that you get together and you do role plays about customer service, and you make sure that people are rotating so that they can learn other areas within the same business, so that they can see and have variation in their training as well and develop in those competencies. Once you have somebody on board, it's important to do evaluations. I don't know about you, but I don't love getting an evaluation. You get to get this feedback on what you're doing well and areas to grow, but I find them to be incredibly valuable. As I hear that feedback, I begin to think through what it is, how much truth is there in that, and what can I do to get better. The scripture talks about iron sharpening iron, and if we are not doing evaluations, we are missing out on a big potential. One of the things that I've done in the ministries that I've worked at over time and the different jobs and businesses that I've worked in is that we do an evaluation, but it starts with a self-evaluation. And so I'm the first person for myself that I fill out the evaluation for myself, and I give an honest judgment of how I think I'm doing in these different areas and what are the potential areas that I want to grow in. And I love the fact that somebody looks at that and talks about it with me, how I feel about myself and where I want to see potential growth. And then for employees, we also have other employees evaluate that employee, and we have customers evaluate that employee. If you have some loyal customers, or remember we call them clients or partners who are willing to give some feedback, those all get compiled together and put alongside of our own self-evaluation so that we can say, this is how others are perceiving us, this is how we perceive ourselves, where is there the opportunity for more growth and greater awareness. This is a very valuable thing, and so I encourage you to have it done for yourself. If you're the owner of the business, you can get your customers, your employees to evaluate you. You can have your business partners, probably your spouse is a business partner in some way, or others from within the industry. It takes a little bit of time to do it, but it can be very helpful as you want to continue to grow. And so make sure that for your employees, that you do it for them, that you are measuring their performance. Did they do what was expected of them? Go through the job description again, and sometimes that's where you're reminded of, oh yeah, that's what I was supposed to be doing as well. But we also want to appraise for further training. What does the employee need? What do they want? What are they longing for? And having that conversation, and I would encourage you do it over a lunch or over a time that can be social, where you talk about what are the person's goals and their heart's desires and how do they want to increase in their own competencies. On the other hand, don't wait for an evaluation, which should happen about once a year, before you address a problem that you see. So if you see a problem with an employee, don't wait until the evaluation to address it. Address those things right away. Again, there can be a lot of damage that can be caused by not addressing challenges right away when you see them, and you want to prevent that and protect your company. Employee relations, again, you want to make sure that you're having good relationships. You want to encourage some things that are important. You want to recognize employees of the month. You want to offer some vacation time. How can the person recoup? And by the way, let me tell you, the importance of vacation time for employees is not only for them, but it's also for the business itself. I don't know if you know, but often fraud will be detected when somebody goes on vacation. And if somebody is resisting taking vacation, you may want to be curious about that and push that a little bit. I had it once where I was running an organization, and we had an accountant who did not want to take a vacation, and we pushed it, and sure enough, we found that there was some fraud that was taking place once that person was on their vacation, on their holiday. So it's important that you make sure people are getting the rest that they need, but you're also making sure that the company is able to see everything that's happening when some person is gone, so that you can also be monitoring those aspects as well. You want to have affirmation for positive behavior, again, creating a fun environment. Maybe you do a casual Friday, or you have a time where you are all bringing in food together and sharing a meal during the week. You want to come up with titles that will help people in terms of their own role. Many of us identify ourselves by the work that we do, and so we say, we introduce ourselves, and very quickly people will say, "What do you do?" And it's nice if we have a nice title. So maybe we are a maintenance specialist instead of a janitor, or we can come up with different terms that can help people to feel good about the work that they are doing, and you can ask for their feedback on that as well. We want to make sure that we respect all of our employees. We want to do that so that we also receive that respect as well, and be a servant leader in that way. We want to have good policies. We want people to know, have an employee manual. Again, it might feel like you're not big enough for this, but if you write it down and you go through it, you can expect compliance on behavior. If you don't have it written down, if it's not something that you can refer back to, it was just a conversation that most people will forget they ever had, and therefore you don't have something to build off of. And so as we come to the end of the human resources, I just want you to think through, what are the challenges in your business community that you have had with staffing or hiring or holding on to people? I know that a lot of people complain as well that they will spend a lot of time training someone and helping that person develop the competencies, and then they just leave. And that's true. That will happen, and it's unfortunate. Sometimes they will leave and they will actually become your competition, and that's not easy for you to see as well. You taught them these skills. On the other hand, my encouragement is that you keep open hands before the Lord in these things, that you have blessed that person, you have blessed them, and now they are to be a blessing, and let's continue to welcome the next person in. But being able to hold on to employees is a sign of also being a good leader, creating an environment where they feel like they can flourish. Those are important things, and so if you're having a lot of turnover, you may need to look at yourself and ask for feedback on that. Do some exit interviews when somebody leaves a job. Ask somebody neutral, maybe not you, somebody neutral, ask them what caused them to leave and what would have helped them to be able to stay. That's the only way we're going to learn, and so encourage that learning for yourself, that learning from your employees, and being open and willing to hear that. As you go about this navigating the challenging course of having more people. Again, people will help you grow, and so our prayer is that God will give you both the need and the right people to grow in that capacity. We want to move now to talking about time management, and time management is something that is very important for a business, and some of us are naturally good at time management, and others of us we just have a really difficult time keeping time. And of course, customers have expectations for time management, and the business itself has expectations for time management. And if we're the leader and we expect other people to be on time and we're not keeping time ourselves, that can be a big challenge. So I don't know where you're listening from, but we also know that different cultures have different attitudes as it relates to time. In North America, time is very important, and in part it's because we are considered to be a cold culture. Cold culture puts the individual above the community, and therefore it is very important as an individual that I keep time. It's more important to keep time than it is to stop and talk to people and to have that relationship growth. In a warm culture, which is much of Africa and a lot of Asia and a lot of Latin America, it's a warm culture where the community is more important than the individual. And so better to be late, but to greet your neighbor than it would be to be on time and keep a meeting because you may have insulted the community by not taking that time. And so what do? I hear people say, oh, we're on African time. And what we often say is there's no African time, there's God's time. Somehow we need to find the balance of keeping our commitments as well as loving our neighbor, and that's a challenge. So I want to talk through time management, and this would be a very good time as well at the end of this session for you to have some conversations about your own challenges for time management. Because one of the things I've seen is it's not a matter of being able to manage time, it's a matter of priorities. Here's an example. I would teach at the the seminary in Western Kenya. And classes always began at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I was amazed that all the pastors were in their chairs 10 minutes before 8 o'clock. And I thought, wow, what happened to African time? And this is great, everybody's here. But you called for a meeting. Everybody agreed to come to a meeting the same day at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And 2:30, there would be nobody there yet. And you're calling people, and, I'm on my way, I'm coming. And we might get the meeting started by 3 o'clock, about an hour late. And so my question was, why are you in your chairs on time for class at 8 o'clock, but you're coming so late to the meeting in the afternoon? And really what it has to do with priorities is we have been taught that education, school, you have to be on time. Meetings, well, I'll get to it. It's important, but it's not as important as some of these other things that I might be doing. And so we have to think through what is the real barrier. If I'm always 10 minutes late for church, then essentially I'm on time, right? I mean, it's my time. I'm always the same amount late. If I could do one thing to bring it back 10 minutes, what is that one thing that I need to do? Because those are some of the priorities that we need to shift and change, and we need to backtrack to make them happen. So there are some time management myths that I want us to look at. And the first is that we can manage time. And actually, we can't manage or save it. All we can do is use it wisely or to waste it. And so the question is, how can you use it wisely? And what are you doing that wastes it? For some people, stopping and talk to many people along the way to a meeting, to an appointment, might be seen as a waste of time. To other people, it's life, it's relationship, it's community. And so how can you use your time wisely? What is it that you can do to allow you to not waste it, to redeem it, so that you are doing both things? You are keeping appointments, but you are also loving your neighbor. And so maybe you have to try to start earlier. You have to leave the house before you take the walk to where the meeting is, so that you have time to greet the people and still get to the place on time. And so we have to recognize that there's only a wise use of it or wasteful use of it. What is it that you are doing that will help you to lean towards redeeming the time that God has given you? Remember, time is the only resource that God has given us of the time, treasure, and talent that is non-renewable. If you use your talent, it will actually grow your talent. If you use your resources, you are able to make more resources. But if you use your time up, you cannot get it back. The second is that time management involves getting more done in less time, and that is actually a myth. What time management does is it actually helps you get fewer things done that are of greater importance, about setting priorities. And so time management is looking at things and not saying, I'm going to try to jam all these things in, but rather to say, I only have so much time. These are the things I need to do with excellence. This is what I'm going to focus on, and this is how I'm going to focus on it. Another time management myth is that to-do lists actually help us get things done. Kind of depends on who you are, though. I happen to love to-do lists, and they actually do help me get things done. But my husband also likes to-do lists, and they never seem to help him get things done. It actually is a waste of time because he makes the to-do list, and then he loses them, and he doesn't actually follow through with them. So you have to know yourself and know whether to-do lists are helpful for you. And if so, how can you do them? Where can you put them to help you remember so that you can get things done? In fact, let me just tell you that I love to-do lists so much that sometimes I will go through my list and I'll think of something that I did that wasn't on the list, and I'll write it down just so I can feel good about writing it down, crossing it off, and it's another thing that I got done. So it's something that you have to think about for you. Fourth time management myth is that people need a personal organizer or another time management tool to get organized. People are not organized because they use a time management tool. They use a time management system to help them because they are already organized. I have a dear friend who struggles with time management, and she has tried every tool possible to help her get organized. And the last time I talked to her, she told me that the new thing that she had that was on her phone to help her stay organized. She actually had put it down on the roof when she was talking to somebody because she loves to talk to people. And she got in her car and drove off, and it was on the roof of her car, and it fell off. And so, you need to find, again, it's not a system necessarily that will help you get organized, but you rather need to figure out how to organize yourself so that the system will work. There's no magic cure of a certain system that will help you, but there are tools and there are things that you can implement to help you on that path of getting yourself organized. Another time management myth is that a quiet hour is a great time management tool. And again, I would say that to a large extent, having that dedicated management time is very important. However, we also live in a world where there are interruptions, and especially as a manager of a business, we may need to be flexible with that. And so it can be a very good thing to have an interruption if it's an important thing for your business. But at the same time, I would also say that having that dedicated quiet time, turning the phone down, closing the door is also very important. So this is something that I would say we need to have a balance. We need to have people who understand that this is time that we need without interruptions, and yet also understanding that if there is something critical that comes up, that we want to be able to flow with that. The sixth one is that keeping a time log to determine where your time is going is a good place to start. And what we want to say with that is, first you want to put in some good time-saving techniques so that you can begin to think through how you will use your time and then begin to log it and to change it from there. But you want to develop some effective habits. So alarms on your phones are a great thing to have you start and stop. There are times when I set alarms just even to stop a meeting so that I don't just start on time, but I know how to end on time because there are other things that have to happen as well. And so there are things that as you look at your day, you can see this is a place where I lose time, this is a place where I need to gain more time. Next is that it is a myth is that it's more efficient to stick to one task until it's completed. Again, this depends on who you are. For me, I don't like to, I become impatient working from a project to start to finish. Other people need to be able to do that. For me, I like to start on one and then I need to have a change. And so then I can go to another one and then another one and then go back. And so again, you have to look at who you are and how God has made you, your personality, to figure out how to manage your time. Because for some people, it's just very difficult to start and end a task, to go from the beginning to the end. There's a time management myth that we should have one planner for the office and a separate planner for the home. And I would say that it's better if you live life in an integrated manner and that you combine it all into one so that you can see fully how and where your day is going. The other myth is that time is money. And of course, we know that when we waste time, there's a potential for a loss of money. But the reality is that time is more than money. It is life. And we do want to respect loving people and having time for people and listening to people and being flexible. We also want to respect that God has called us to do things with our time that are important. And so talking to other people who are in your life and maybe those who have managed time well, and see what you can learn with them. But we also sometimes need to respect the fact, for myself, I need to love the fact that my husband is not as time conscious because he's better at being with people and being fully present than I am at times. And so he learns some things from me and how I manage time, and I learn some things from him and how to let go of time. And so we can be iron sharpening iron in this, and I hope that you have an opportunity to talk about that with each other as well. What you can see in your book is a box, and this is called the Eisenhower box, and it's a box that shows importance and urgency. And I love this quote from Eisenhower, which says, "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." And of course, Eisenhower was a president who was able to share this, but what I often talk about in my own life and in my own set of busyness is what's called the tyranny of the urgent. And the tyranny of the urgent are people who present crises and things that feel very urgent. But I think that this quote is exactly right, that often what feels urgent is not what is important. And we have to discern for ourselves where to spend our time. And so this box, this chart that you see in your workbook talks about 1, 2, 3, and 4 in terms of the boxes. Number 1 talks about things that are urgent and important, and we should do them right away. Number 2 are things that are important, but they are not urgent, and so we have to decide when we are going to do it. And for example, there are a number of projects or things that I need to get done, and I will just put it on my calendar that even if it's to schedule a meeting with somebody, I will put it on my calendar so I remember to do it. And so whether you use a calendar on your phone, whether you use a paper calendar, take that time to just make sure that you write down when things need to happen so you'll remember to get them done. The third box there is that it's not important and not urgent, and therefore you should dump it. You should get rid of it. And the fourth box is that it's urgent but not important, and those are things that you need to delegate. So let's look at an example of what this might look like. Things that are both important and urgent, so that top left box. An example for somebody who is a writer, maybe working for a journalist, working for a newsletter, urgent and important is to write an article for today. So that is something that needs to get done. It's urgent. I have a deadline, and I need to write it. What is important but not urgent is something that I need to decide when I can schedule it into my day. Maybe I need to be looking for other articles, doing research on that. I need to come up with some long-term strategies for how I'm going to find the ideas for articles. And so that ends up in the important but not urgent category, which is a very important category. What is not important and not urgent is getting caught up and looking at junk email or junk mail that you might get, or checking social media is something that needs to be controlled during our workday. We need to dump those, get rid of those, somehow end that temptation when we are in a work setting. And then lastly, the urgent but not important box, which is what can we delegate? If we are needing to respond to some emails, we can delegate that to somebody else, or returning some phone calls, or checking in on certain things. Again, part of management is knowing how to delegate, and so that would be important. And so in the important but urgent box, we see that we want to handle things that are a crisis. We want to look at pressing issues. We want to look at deadlines. We want to look at meetings. In the urgent, the important but not urgent box, we might look at those things that involve preparation and planning, prevention, relationship building, personal development. Again, those are important, but they are not urgent. That means that there's not going to be a lot of noise, and we might always want to push those things off. But if we do that, we will not get that important planning done. And so we put it into the calendar and we say, this is the chunk of time that I'm going to be working on that. And unless something really urgent comes up, I should not be distracted during that time. During the urgent but not important, we can think about some interruptions from some people. We can think about some conversations, lots of activities that we might be involved in that get carried away in terms of time. They feel urgent, but they aren't necessarily important. And then, of course, the not important and not urgent is going to be some phone calls that we have to make, some time wasters that we get involved in, and games maybe that we're playing or TV that we're watching that ends up eating into some time that we could be using in other ways. So the tips that we want to offer is take the 30 minutes of every day to plan your day, and ask for the Lord's leading. Pray that He will lead you and guide you for this day to use your time as if He is watching over your time and as the owner is helping you to manage it. Make sure that you spend no less than an hour a week on management issues, looking at the big picture. Do not get so caught up in the urgency of some things that you miss out on what is important but not urgent. Take 5 minutes before every call that you make or every person that you're meeting with to just consider the purpose of the focus of that visit and the goal so that you can be able to fulfill it. Don't be afraid to put a do not disturb sign out when you have to get something done, and make sure that people understand that unless it's a crisis, unless it's urgent and important, you should not be interrupted. And then remember the 80-20 rule. The 80-20 rule is called the Pareto principle, and it says basically that in everything, 20% is vital and 80% is trivial. And so an example of that is that 20% of your staff will likely produce 80% of your productivity. 20% of your staff will likely produce 80% of your productivity. 20% of your staff will also provide 80% of the problems that you might be having. 20% of the defects that you might have in your product line will cause 80% of the problems, and so on. And so as you're looking at your time and how you are managing things, make sure that you are spending your time on those things that can really affect change and that are useful for the kingdom and good for your business. There's a lot that can be covered with time management, and I know it's a big challenge. Just remember to take things a day at a time, begin to develop those habits so that you can continue on them as God has called you. Thank you so much, and we wish you God's blessing in the time that you have. Thank you.